Well, a very warm welcome indeed, and it's great to have you here for tonight's event, which is organised by Trinity Church, Islington. It's called Is Christianity a Friend or Foe to Our Mental Health? My name is Jeremy Hobson. I'm on the staff team at Trinity Church, Islington. Let me tell you briefly how we're hoping the evening is going to run. First, we're going to have a 40-minute panel discussion with our three panel members, Connie, Joe and Andrew. And then after that, there'll be the chance to put some questions to the panel. If you want to submit a question at any point during tonight's discussion, then do use the phone number, which is going to come up on the screen. And that will be the way to get in touch. I can then read those questions and put them to the panel members. Finally, I'll sum up at the end with some further information about how you might find some help if that's what you're looking for, and some other resources before we finish the evening at about 9:15. The question tonight then is Christianity a friend or foe to our mental health? And we may or we may not have had a mental health diagnosis in our lifetime, something like depression, bipolar disorder, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder. But all of us have a mental landscape. And all of us from time to time will probably experience some symptoms of mental health challenges. And there's plenty of evidence that lockdown has seen an increase in the number of us who are facing mental health problems day to day. Added to the fact that this is Mental Health Awareness Week, it seems like a good time to explore some of the issues around mental health and the way in which they connect with the Christian faith. It's worth saying, just as we begin, this is a huge and an important topic, and for some it's a difficult one. And while we hope that our conversation will be useful, we know that we won't be able to cover every angle of mental health in such a short space of time, nor really address individual situations. But please do ask questions at any time during tonight's event, and share comments. And we'll be talking a little bit later on about how to access different resources if it's information and help that you're looking for. Well, it's great to be joined by others too. So with me are Connie, Joe and Andrew, all bringing a slightly different angle on this subject of mental health. Connie, Joe and Andrew, why don't you say a little bit more about the experience that you're hoping to bring to the discussion tonight?
Great. Well, shall I kick off? Thank you so much to everyone who's come. We're really delighted you're here. And so from my teenage years, really, I've gone through various different challenges with my mental health. So I had a diagnosis as a teenager of depression. And then over the years since then have experienced various different symptoms. I've struggled with things like self-harm and eating disorders. The lowest moment was an attempt on my life as a teenager. I'm very thankful that wasn't successful. And yeah, it's been a rocky road. Recent years have been more stable, but I'd say it's like a daily experience of battling depression and anxiety, particularly day to day. And I work with students, so I walk alongside quite a lot of people who are struggling. I guess we all struggle, don't we? But my job with students means that I interact with quite a lot of young people who are struggling or suffering themselves, figuring out what it means to grow up and to navigate this world, which has severe effects on people's mental health. So I also, I'll walk alongside others and have friends who struggle with various different mental illnesses. I'm also a Christian, so I guess that is another angle on this question.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much. And really good to be here. My name's Joe. I am a clinical psychologist, and I've been working in NHS mental health services sort of over the last 10 years, mostly with adults. I currently work for a mental health team that looks after older adults locally, and I work in a physical health setting as well. And in my job as a clinical psychologist, I am part of a team that seeks to look after or help to look after people with mental health concerns and understand really what their struggles and difficulties are, but also seek to understand their symptoms in the context of what's happening in their life and relationships, and sort of taking a kind of multidisciplinary, multi-professional approach. And I'm trained in different types of talking therapy as well, which aim to offer at least a partial understanding or sort of theories that help people. And I'm a Christian too.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks. Yeah, I love discussions like this, and I'm so glad for the chance to be here and to listen to your questions in due course, and to these two other panelists who are more experienced than me in very important ways. My own background is that I trained as a doctor of medicine, and I was a doctor for about 10 years, but I think it's important to say I didn't specialise, certainly not in psychiatry, nor in general practice. So many doctors will know more about psychiatry and mental illness than I will. And if you're on the call tonight and you want to ask a question that comes out of that expertise, then please feel very free to do that. Then after 10 years as a doctor, I switched, if you like, from body to soul and retrained as a pastor. And I've done that for about 15 years. And in that, towards the end of that time, I began to develop a particular interest in ways of thinking that united the kind of approach to people that I'd learned as a doctor, and the kind of approach to people I was trying to learn as a pastor. And I've done a bit of thinking about biblical counselling, which is just trying to unite those worlds, trying to see how the world of Christianity and Christian faith speaks into the world of the real world in which we all live, including issues like mental health and mental illness. So from that perspective, I've done a bit of thinking about that kind of overlap. And I guess that's one of the issues at the heart of the discussion tonight.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, let me ask the first question. What is mental health, and how does it reflect who we are? How does it fit in with the people that we are?
I think I would maybe just sort of start off by it's always helpful to sort of define terms, isn't it? There are probably some different ways of understanding mental health, but when we kind of really boil it down, it's a dimension of well-being that is related to our minds and our emotions. That's how I would explain it as a psychologist in a nutshell. So I think one sort of way of understanding mental health is that it can be on a continuum. So just like physical health, we do things to maintain our physical health and look after it. There are perhaps times when we're feeling more mentally well and more robust. But there are other times when we need to sort of take extra care of our mental health. So our mental health is not necessarily a fixed state, but we move up and down this continuum from well to less well, depending on a very wide range of factors. I think, and I would sort of see somebody as perhaps needing additional mental health care or support, or we might think about diagnosing a mental health problem if somebody is becoming very, very distressed, if they are not able to do things in their life that they would normally do, and if their usual ways of coping are not working. And certainly if there's any sort of concern about safety, then certainly we'd think about that person perhaps offering that person additional help.
Thank you. And our minds and our bodies are in constant sort of dialogue, aren't they? So it's not something that can be separated out as simply a sort of brain thing. So how does it fit into the sort of whole person that we are?
I think one of the key measures of human thriving is the quality of our relationships. And I'm an introvert, and if you ask me to imagine paradise, I will imagine a beach with no people on it, in glorious sunshine and palm trees, and no one in sight. But I know from past experience that if I were ever in a situation like that, I will at some point begin to wish I had someone to share it with. And I think one of the most important measures of us as human beings is how we are in our relationships. One of the reasons why mental health is so important is because it so impacts my ability to relate to other people. For example, if I'm profoundly depressed, it will be very difficult for me to share the emotions of another person. If they're happy, I won't feel it with them as I normally would. If they're grieving, it won't make the impact on me perhaps that it normally would, because it's become much harder for me to respond, and that has a huge impact on relationships. And I think, as a Christian, I think the relationships that we have with one another are clearly very important to the Christian faith. The command to love our friends and indeed our enemies, to relate well, generously, sacrificially to other people is really big in Christian teaching. Also, our relationship with our Creator, actually, from a Christian perspective, is the most important relationship that we have. You could not have a more important relationship than that which you have with the person who made you, with the God who made you. And mental health impacts that relationship profoundly. There are all kinds of emotions that are described in the lives of people living out their relationship with God. Jesus himself experienced a wide range of emotions, and when the ability to respond with normal emotions to normal things of life is damaged or impaired, it makes life very, very difficult. It's a very, very heavy burden to carry in those relationships with God and with others.
So, Connie, you were saying that you've had some lived experience of some of these challenges, maybe in your relationships. How did you find that it affected the relationships that you were involved in?
Yeah, I think when you're suffering, I mean, I'm really aware as I speak, it's just my experience, and there'll be probably people listening in who have really different experiences. But for me, when I'm particularly depressed or anxious, struggling, it can be very hard to relate to other people. I find often I want to kind of hide away. You want to detach from I want to detach from human relationships. It can make me quite suspicious as well, and like what's the word, like assuming the worst, assuming everyone's out to get me. For me, I have quite a negative voice in my head that's very critical and angry, and like, you're rubbish, you're useless, nobody wants you, like all those kinds of things, which then naturally affect how you relate to other people when you're experiencing that, and how you relate to God. So I think sometimes these things are harder. Well, I don't know if hard is the right word for Christians, but because we're told that we can pray and we can talk to God and he'll kind of meet us and things, but actually when you're completely numb, or you're ashamed, or you don't really understand what's going on in your mind and body, then I don't know, it doesn't even form words, let alone try and talk to God or understand what he might be saying to me. And it can be hard to receive help from other people. I think one of the things I find hardest actually is trying to explain it to other people. So I'm trying to kind of explain what I'm feeling, and then even really good loving people around me who really want to help, and maybe they just don't understand, and that can actually be really deeply painful, and it can make me more want to go into a shell and kind of hide away. You sort of merge a little bit and say something, and then someone doesn't quite understand you, or you maybe just perceive that they don't understand you, and then you sort of want to hide away again, when actually often that's when you need other people and things. But yeah, I don't know if that
Now, a book that I've read on depression, not particularly from a Christian perspective, is one by Lewis Wolpert called "Malignant Sadness," and he says severe depression is a weird state. If you can describe your depression, you almost certainly have not truly experienced it. So I think you're certainly not the only person who struggled to describe it.
I think sometimes it kind of, I don't know if other people, but for me, it can feel like I'm sort of talking to people through this like haze or this piece of glass or something, and you like can't connect. And also your memory, it's like quite hard to even concentrate on what people are saying or remember what they're saying. So it feels, just quite hard to relate, which, like Andrew was saying, is so important. Human relationships and when we don't have those, that damages, I think, our physical and our mental. I find there's quite a link. When I'm low, my body feels like sore, and it's actually hard to have the energy even to get up and to go out.
Of course.
And that can be quite distressing in itself, because then you think, oh, what's wrong with me? And
Well, one place where those relationships are often expressed for Christian is in church. And I know that the church hasn't always had the most understanding approach to mental health issues. But at the same time, church can be a great place to find support. So, Joe, have you had experience of people going along to church? How have they found that? Have any of your clients maybe in the past found that a helpful thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it can be a bit of a mixed bag. So yeah, certainly there has been a sort of a range of experiences. Kind of just wanted to connect it as well to Connie, what you were saying about other people's responses and things that can be sort of helpful and less helpful. I think that really sort of connects to this area, and perhaps later on we might talk a bit more about maybe sort of how to offer that support. I mean, everyone will be doing it already, but I think there are certain responses maybe within churches that can invite sort of further feelings of maybe guilt or shame. There's a great book written by a Christian psychiatrist about depression and the title of the book is "I'm Not Supposed to Feel Like This." And I think that, there are so many commands to rejoice in the Bible, and as Christians, we are so looking forward to a brighter future, and we want to share the great news of the gospel, the good news that God has reached out to us and sent His Son to this earth so we can be reconciled to God again. I think sort of being a Christian is definitely not a kind of exemption from suffering. I see mental health difficulties as, I think, just being another dimension upon which we can suffer in this life. And sometimes, unfortunately, there are sort of perhaps responses within churches where people can sort of feel invited to feel like a bad Christian or to feel shame because they are sort of suffering and that's a pity, because we see in various parts of the Bible, particularly the Psalms, how Christian people are pouring out their hearts to God. And God wants to hear from us. He really wants to hear about what is on our hearts, both difficult and good. I'm sure others can say more about that as well.
I'm very struck by what you say there, Joe. There's no doubt that church has sometimes been a real foe to people with mental health. And I say that as someone who used to lead a church in a time when I didn't understand it very well. And I think that may have been painful for people who were experiencing difficulties in their mental health. And yet, I mean, there are lots of reasons why religion and faith can do that. It can load burdens on us and say you're only entitled to feel good about God if certain things are working well in your life, and that would be typical of the way people sort of imagine religion functions. And we can do church in a similar kind of way. That in the end, it depends on us to be together and sorted. And if we are, we should be feeling good. And if we're not feeling good, then we're clearly in a state. And that's really far away from the world of the Bible. In fact, keying off one of the things Connie said was so hard to express sometimes. It's really struck me how helpful sometimes people have found it to see in Scripture words that describe how they're feeling better than they knew how to find the words themselves. Phrases like, the waters have come over my head. Pictures of drowning, or feeling like I'm already in the grave. I've died already. Or darkness is my closest friend. Which says so powerfully in so few words. I've got no one else I can have a meaningful relationship with except just the dark. And even God has seemed far away and inaccessible and closed to me. And there are Christians who never seem to read those parts of the Bible, or at least don't read them very seriously and don't think they're describing what is real. And actually, they absolutely are describing what is real. And even Jesus himself, quoted words like that about the feeling of being utterly forsaken and alone. And so Christianity ought to be a great friend to people experiencing some of those things, and it can be. Christians aren't always. And that when we are veering towards a culture of performance, when we're veering towards a culture of needing to be smiley, when we're veering in those kinds of ways, it can be very alienating, I think. And one of the things that I have been thinking a lot about in recent weeks that Jesus said is, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." And that's what church should feel like. If life is hard, the church should feel like it is a great friend and a good place to come because we understand that. But that challenges me to how do I treat people so that I'm a good person? How do we create groups that are a good place for people to come to when they're feeling heavy laden? As we should be.
Yeah, can I add to that? I think some of the beliefs that are part of the kind of Christian message can be quite difficult if you're struggling. So people will often say things like, this is amazing future hope of eternal life. When I'm struggling, I'm like, why would I want life to go on forever? That sounds awful. I don't want life to go on another minute. Like, why would I possibly want to believe in eternal life? And especially when your feelings are numb, it's really hard to think that. But then I think that's where the Christian message can also be wonderful. So these are just some words about what it's going to be like, that eternal future life, that when I come back to are just amazing. It's described as so it's talking about God's going to wipe away every tear from their eyes. So the people in God's family, he's going to wipe away every tear. There's going to be no more death, no more mourning, no more crying, no more pain, like no more numbness, no more like excruciating numb pain that you kind of can feel and can't feel all at the same time. The old order of things is going to have passed away. Like that's all going to have gone. And even when, so it's like on one hand, it's really a hard kind of teaching from Christianity, but also it's like the most amazing thing that like, regardless of how I feel, that's like an objective truth. It's a reality that if I follow Jesus is going to be real to me one day, that he's just going to get rid of all the numb, awful pain, brokenness. He's going to just kick out all of that. It's going to be so different. And the other thing I was thinking as you were talking, Andrew, is I think just to really reiterate what Andrew said is that I found the Bible actually has been the place which has most given words to my experiences. And I've been really surprised as well about what I'm allowed to say to God. I didn't grow up in a Christian family or anything, and I I used to think, basically, if there was a God out there, I needed to be good, and then it'd be okay. Like, if there's a God there, I probably get to go to heaven because I'm good enough. And I was quite a good, I tried to be good. And I thought it was all about Jesus being good. And so then to realize there's these Psalms, they're like the songs of God's people. And one of the ones that I kept going back to recently, it says, "How long, Lord, are you going to forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle my thoughts and day to day have sorrow in my heart?" And he goes on to say other stuff, but it's like it gives a voice and it articulates something of the kind of the pain. I mean, there's lots more. Andrew referred to a few there. I'm talking a lot, but I actually have one really lovely story at the time when I was really struggling. There was a time, and about 4 years ago, where my life sort of fell apart. I was really, really struggling with my mental health. I felt really low, depressed, kind of on the edge of life, really. And the church family, the church community that I'm a part of, it was kind of obvious to them, I guess. And there was a family who in the church who I didn't know. I think I'd met them once. And they basically said, "Come and live with us. You can have our spare room. You don't need to pay any rent. We'll feed you. You can spend time with our small children." And I remember saying to them, I was like, "But I'm not very well. Are you sure you're happy for me to be around your children?" And they were just like, "Come, you can be part of our family. We'll look after you. We'll care for you. We'll help you get better." And they did. I lived with them for 3 months and then moved locally and kind of kept spending time with them. And it was just, I've had a lot, mostly my experiences of actually church community have been really positive and like that, and people caring and loving, and even if they don't understand, really wanting to help and to understand.
Thank you very much indeed. Just a reminder of that phone number. If you haven't already got it, it's 07377 960 507. That's 07377 960 507. Already a few questions coming through. Thank you for those. Well, let's think about ways in which we might be able to help people that we might know who are going through a tough time with their mental health. So if we have friends like that, what might be some of the good things that we can do as Christians to help them?
I wonder if it might be helpful to kick off and say one of the unhelpful things that we can do, and then say the positive that goes with it. One is to imagine that the church is all the help that anybody needs, that all the resources that God might have for somebody are to be found within the walls of the church and within the church community, and that a really faithful person should cut themselves off from medical professionals and therapists and counsellors who might not believe in God. That's been tried, sometimes with disastrous results, and I am absolutely convinced it's not the wise or right or kind or loving thing for Christians or churches to do. There are all kinds of wisdom and expertise and understanding available outside the church, and they range from the authority of the law when someone's mental health makes them a danger to themselves or to other people, to incredible expertise at very complicated and difficult, long-standing issues which no one in the church will have had any contact with before and not have a clue how to respond to very high quality, very experienced ways of helping in what you could call normal mental health problems. So there's all kinds of things that are accessible there. Having said that, I think that let me start with this. Other people want to say different things. I think that there is an area which the church is uniquely able to talk about, and that's that most important relationship of all, which is that between a person and their creator. And one thing that is unhelpful is when someone is mentally unwell, struggling, is to, as it were, take our hands off because we feel we don't know what to do and how to help, and say nothing and do nothing and leave them, as it were, effectively outside the church community, unloved, uncontacted, because we're never quite sure what to do and we don't want to make it worse. And actually, we need to find ways of moving towards people as they're getting help from all kinds of other places. And that might mean coordination, it might mean teamwork, it might mean partnership, it might mean all kinds of practical things, because these things can go on for a long time and be quite wearing. But to make sure that such a person remains a part of the church community in whatever way they're able to sustain. They're not forced to come to anything. They're not pestered by people knocking down the door, but a little daily text message, or a card, or a regular 5-minute visit. There are all kinds of little ways of making sure someone knows that they still belong in the community of God's people, and where they have capacity, that they're hearing something of how God still feels about them and His love and care for them, experiencing it in the lives of the church family. And people have vary greatly when they're struggling with mental illness, but to the extent that they're able, the church is still helping and encouraging them understand the unconditional, unwavering love of God and commitment to His people, in tiny little bite-sized pieces, or maybe even not with words, just being there regularly, consistently, communicating the same truth about love, but in that kind of faithful friend, I'm here for you kind of way, which may be communicate more powerfully than words that are difficult to process.
Yeah.
I wonder if you go, Jo.
No, you go.
I was just going to say, I wonder if sometimes we can assume when someone's struggling with their mental health, which they may not have articulated very clearly to you, and they're not kind of doing the things we expect Christians to do, like, I don't know, coming to church or listening to God speak to them in His word, or talking to Him in prayer and things like that. We can assume that maybe they don't believe in God, or they're not wanting to follow God or something, when actually it might be that they're trying, say, to read and to listen to what God says to them, which is one of the greatest privileges of all humanity, actually, whether you believe in God or not. If you read the Bible, you get to listen to Him speak, which is pretty cool. But it might be about trying to help people find different ways, by which I mean things like, something I found really helpful was listening to some music, which sometimes it was the words of God's words in the Bible put to music that I could listen to, and somehow for me that connected my heart and like woke up my spirit in a way that really nothing else did. And actually I felt quite guilty and bad. It actually made me feel worse, the fact that I couldn't really read the Bible, because I knew that it was in going to God that I was going to find hope and help and all these things, but I just it was like I kind of said, like looking through fog or mist or something. So even just offering to someone kind of, I don't know, this might not land with you, it might not connect, but I listened to this song and I thought of you. Not to worry if it isn't helpful, but you might find some of the words helpful. I listened to, that time I was saying I stayed with that family, there was one album that I just listened to on repeat permanently, and the words of those songs just really connected for me, and it was like they were these kind of solid posts in the ground which reminded me what was true, and it enabled me to keep going in that time. They weren't everything, but it was what I could digest at that time, and that was really helpful to me.
And Jo, in terms of kind of useful places to start, useful things to say to people if we're not quite sure if they're struggling, what might be a useful place to start?
Oh, well, just to say, I completely share in everything Andrew and Connie have said. I think, yeah, those are all amazing ideas. In terms of places to start, I think if someone has told you that they're struggling, feeling low, finding something really difficult, I feel like that's a great privilege, and I feel like you want to say something that kind of maybe encourages connection, I think sometimes we think, oh, I need to think of like exactly the right thing to say, or perhaps we want to, I mean, you know, maybe we're caring people and we want to help and fix things, but actually I think just sometimes even saying something like, I'm really glad you've told me about that. But, you know, I don't quite know what the right thing is to say. But I'm so glad you've told me. Thank you for telling me. Let's talk more. You know, I've got time. Do you want to go for a walk? And I think all of these things are very much helped by existing relationship with the person. So there isn't actually a sort of one-size-fits-all way to help people, but I'm really hoping that kind of in churches and in our relationships with people, we know people, we know them, so it's really hard to love and care for someone well if you don't know them very well. So hopefully there's kind of a bit of that existing kind of relational infrastructure there. People are different, so you know, some of us love, you know, we love hugs and doing lots of talking, but actually, you know, for other people it's that's not really quite the right fit, or you know, as Connie said, like they'd feel really held in mind if you just, you know, dropped a card round or dropped their favourite chocolate round. You know, they might not want like a kind of a big kind of deep conversation, or you might not be the right person for that. So I think rules of thumb: listening. Sometimes we want to offer suggestions because we feel uncomfortable and we want to fix it, but try and kind of hold back on that and put the brakes on there. Better to ask questions and try, you know, I guess sort of things like trying not to assume you know how someone's feeling, but ask a kind of open question if you're getting the sense that that they're trusting you to kind of want to talk about that. Feel free to add other suggestions, everyone, as well.
I think one more thing, the biggest thing I think is being able to sit with the pain and the difficulty, like having someone who is just present and they're not expecting anything of you, and they're not, there's a time to, we'll maybe talk about this later, encourage someone to go to the GP or encourage them to get help and support, but like week by week, month by month, year by year, having a friend or friends who you don't have to explain it to, who literally will just be with you, and you know that they love you, because you already feel like a huge burden when you're going through this stuff. You already feel like you're messing up everyone's life. The world would be a better place without you. So people who show you in whatever way, like, I'm just with you and I don't expect anything of you. And when you want to talk, if you want to talk, I'm here and I'm not going to judge what you say. And I know that everything you say might not be, you know, what you believe all the time, and kind of aren't afraid of the big things and the big feelings and the big emotions. It's probably worth saying those people, to be a really good friend like that, you probably need support as well, because you can't absorb all of that yourself. Maybe we'll come on to that. But I think those people are like life-giving, amazing people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess right at the heart of Christianity is the person of Jesus Christ, and he seemed to have a particular openness towards people who were struggling, people who were weak and didn't feel terribly capable. I mean, what do you think we learned from the way that Jesus came alongside people?
I think we learn how really to relate to people. We learn what it actually looks like to love people. It's an amazing beauty about Jesus. He was able to say pretty strong things, but he reserved that for people who were getting in the way of others and actually who were making life worse for people. You know, laying burdens on people. When people were burdened, when they came to him with remarkable freedom and enjoyment, and from little children, he made a point of saying, I know, I want to spend time with them. He wasn't just out for the shakers and the movers. He pushed many of them away in order to leave space and time for people who are broken, people who are suffering, people who were in all kinds of great torment. And he addressed it, I guess, in two main ways. One is, with as much time and energy as he had, he fixed them with an extraordinary power that none of us have, and I wish we did. That's what Connie talked about. One day God will fix, like he did when he came to earth. That's the kind of radical transformation that we are able to look forward to, amazingly, with confidence. But the other thing he did was to speak to people about God and about how to have a relationship with him, to warn people that he'd come himself to be God with us, but in the end to die on a cross so that we could understand the lengths to which God would go to share our brokenness. We know that at the moments of greatest aloneness, even at that moment where we feel like death is very close to us, Jesus even knows that moment, because he's been there too. And to have a God like that who reaches out to us is it's unimaginable, which is why no other world religion has dared imagine a God like that. Either imagine a God who's got absolutely no power, or a God who's very remote in all power, and they can't have both: a God who's all powerful and all loving, that he'll get involved in our mess to that degree. I love that about Jesus.
I think the thing about Jesus, one of the things about Jesus that's so amazing is there've been so many times in my life where even with the greatest friends, I've just thought I'm too much, like the intensity of the emotions, or the difficult situations have just felt too overwhelming for me or for others. And the remarkable thing about Jesus is that you can't be too much for Jesus. Like you just can't. Like Andrew just said, he comes into the world as a human. He's lived our experience. He has been utterly abandoned by his closest friends. They deny that they know him. He was on the cross. He was stripped naked and exposed. Like his entire body was like vulnerable and naked. He was ashamed. If you think of the horror of that situation, I don't know, some people would have been in that situation themselves, and actually he knows that feeling, and more. He lived these things, he knows, but it's not just that he can kind of come alongside and say, oh, I've been there too, I'm a comfort, which is an amazing thing when a human person does that, isn't it? When you find someone else who's had a similar experience and they get it and you're like, there's like that relief. But he's not just a human being. He claims to be God. He says he's God entering into the mess, the brokenness, the pain. And the whole point that he did that is to come and to rescue people, to bring them into relationship with him. He's not just the kind of wounded person who can come alongside and help us and kind of point us a bit in the right direction. He came into the world and said, do you know, actually, I'm going to go and die on a cross to deal with all the mess, to deal with all the injustice, the wrong, the things that have been done to you, the things that you've done. Like, I know for me, there's things that have unsettled my mental health, that have been, done to me, that are painful and that hard. And actually, God's going to right those injustices, the things that I find difficult. God's going to sort in my own heart, like often the way I've responded to those things, or just, the way I treat my flatmates day to day, or the way I don't respond rightly. Like, there are so many injustices going on in our world at the moment, aren't there? And I try to, do what I can, but I don't do what I should. And he's going to pay for the kind of ugliness in my heart as well. he's not just someone who kind of says, oh, they're there. He comes in and says, look, they're there, but I'm actually here and I'm going to right all the wrongs. And one day I'm going to take you to that perfect place, like I was talking about before, where there's no more crying, there's no more wrong, there's no more sickness or sadness. Sorry, I've gone on. I just think it's amazing. Like, it's almost unbelievable. It's so good, I think. Yeah.
You put that so well, Connie, and the idea that you were sharing there, that a lot of the stuff that's wrong in the world is stuff that comes at us, and a lot of stuff that's wrong in the world is stuff that comes out of us. It comes out of me. I mess up the world for my family in fairly significant ways from time to time, and that's bad enough before them, but before God, that's a really big deal. And the cross was Jesus taking what I really deserve for the way that I live on himself. And it'd take a lot more to explain that, but it's so helpful to hear you say, or this is true of all of us. It's not like there are some people who are bad and some people who are good. The line between good and bad runs through every human heart, was said famously, and it certainly runs through mine. And the bad's a problem between us and God, and that's why Christ came to pay the consequences so that relationship doesn't have to remain broken anymore.
I think also one more thought. Okay. Is that right, Jerry? I think
yes,
also
please,
when you're struggling with poor mental health, I don't know about others who may be listening in, but I can feel very guilty and burdened and a lot of shame. And I think a lot of that probably is actually wrong. Shame, it's like not actually shame. And kind of guilt says like I've done something wrong, where shame says like I am wrong, I am bad. I think others might be able to correct, but I think that's roughly right. And that can be a really hard thing to shift. And I think one of the freeing things about the good news that Jesus brings as well is that we don't need to necessarily figure out, like when you're mentally unwell, your mind can kind of go over and over and over and like, is it my fault? I'm bad, all this stuff. And it's quite exhausting. And actually to know that there's a God who sees everything and who I can come to and say, God, I'm so sorry for the things that I've got wrong. I don't really even understand what's my fault and what's not, but thank you that you cover it all. There's a verse in the Bible there's a sentence that says that he rejoices over us for singing. Like if we come to God, he rejoices, he loves us that much. We just need to come to him, and it frees us from that kind of overthinking and over obsession about like, is this my fault? Does that make sense? I don't know.
It does. Yeah, it does.
And that's freeing, isn't it? And it's so not what we're used to as humans. We are quite used to sort of like striving or trying to be good or earning things, like doing stuff, and it's sort of in quite a kind of transactional way. But what you are both describing is actually kind of God has reached out and sorted it out, and we basically have to stop trying to strive to be right with God ourselves, but accept that gift of reconciliation that he's provided through Jesus.
One of the beautiful pictures that Jesus used on the night before he was betrayed was with his disciples, and he used the picture of washing, which is a beautiful picture for guilt and for shame. He says, if I've washed you, you're clean. And that sense of, I don't need to know where the dirt came from. If I've washed you, you're clean. And it's an amazingly precious thing to begin to unpack and to go on unpacking.
Okay, we're going to stop for questions in about 5 minutes' time, but I've just got one more question to put to the panel. So I think we're going to talk a little bit about the Mind website, or at least mention it. I can't recommend it highly enough. But according to the Mind website, 1 in 4 people will experience a mental health problem of some kind each year in England. 1 in 4 people. So if I'm one of those 1 in 4 people, and I wake up or I start to experience challenges in my mental health, like the ones we've described, what do I do? Can you help me? Where do I go? What are the first things to do if I need to find some help? Joe, can I put that to you to start with?
Yeah, sure. Talk to someone you trust. And I would also say first port of call is your GP or family doctor. Go along, have a chat. That's exactly what they're there for. Seek some advice, and I think maybe easier said than done, but sort of I think can be frightening. You might feel low or sad or overwhelmingly anxious, or there might be other troubling aspects of your experience. Please know that you're not alone, that there are others who experience similar things that you can be connected with, but also that there are people who care about you and reach out to family, friends, and there are also services that are specifically there to try to take care of you as well. And that's speaking from an NHS point of view, that's exactly what we're here for.
Okay, thank you. And Andrew, we've spoken about a sort of some of the benefits of reaching out to your Creator. I think that's how you put it, and some of the kindness that we can see in Jesus. And then we've spoken about some therapies, talking therapies like CBT, or maybe some help with antidepressants and that kind of thing, or sort of support from your friends. So how does all that fit together? How does the sort of spiritual and the physical go together?
I mean, in a sense, mysteriously, we can't separate it. There's one moment where the body and soul get separated, and that's death. Until then, you can't pick apart what is a body thing and what is a soul thing. You can see that things seem to be predominantly, if a broken leg is something wrong with your leg, but your soul's invested in it and engaged with it and affected by it. My goodness, if you can't get about, your relationships suffer. If you're in pain all the while you're talking to somebody, the conversation suffers. There's all kinds of ways in which, because people are body and soul, we're going to find help from body specialists and soul specialists helpful. There are different ways of addressing and thinking about, how to find expertise in those different parts. And I think, the kind of the one-line summary is church and state. NHS, hospitals, doctors, whatever, and church. And church hasn't always been brilliant, but Jesus is such an impressive figure in the face of every kind of human difficulty, and many people haven't yet discovered that about Jesus. So maybe the church should focus there and help people access all the other kinds of help, because going to get help is always one of the hardest things to do, especially when you have a mental illness. So walk alongside people and find whatever expertise is there through your GP, through the other local services, mental health teams, A&E if you need. Just keep going, looking for help from other people until you've found something that connects.
Yeah. Connie, anything you'd like to add to that?
I don't know. Sorry, I was distracted.
So how did you find different therapies sort of interacted with the sort of spiritual help that you found as well?
So I've taken antidepressants. I I guess these things is the right word, multifactorial. So for some people, antidepressants really help. For some, they don't find them that effective. There's lots of different ones. It can take a while to find the right one. I think Andrew might be able to say better than me, but I think if there's something going wrong, like if you had a broken leg, you'd get a splint or whatever cast to fix it. And with mental health, clearly there's more going on than just something wrong in the brain. But if one part of it is there's something misfiring or something wrong, then I kind of think, why not take something which might be helpful for that? And then talking therapies, I've actually had a whole mixture. And if you want to ask more in the questions, like I'm happy to say more about it. But briefly, there's a whole range of things. And actually one of the things I found overwhelming is knowing like which one and what to do, which is actually where the NHS is super helpful, because they'll point you in the direction of like what they think will be helpful. And to be honest, I'd always encourage people to talk to the GP, even if you're not really sure. Like I've thought for a long time, and regularly even, I mean, I've had these diagnoses for a long time, but I still, if I'm struggling, I'm like, oh, but I don't really know, what will they do? But sometimes even just going to the GP and saying, this is going on and I don't really know what to do about it. And they go, that's okay, let's just have a bit of a chat about it. It can like take off some of the pressure. And I think we think, oh, I'm wasting GP's time or whatever. You're not. That's what they're there for. They want to help. Yeah, and you could take a friend with you. Sometimes I found that helpful. I don't always remember, so a friend to come and like write stuff down or whatever is quite helpful. I've one treatment which I found really helpful for what I was struggling with at the time was cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. Sometimes people talk about it, and it didn't kind of fix all the problems or anything, but it really helped. It's about if you've got negative thoughts, like retraining your brain to, I guess, like rewire how you think. And I thought, actually, as a Christian, the way I had it anyway, it was really helpful, because as a Christian, I'm aware that I kind of naturally think one way, but actually I want to bring my thinking in line with what God says, because his ways are the best. So, and when I live God's way, it's good for me. It's good for my mental and emotional health, for my relationships, for everything. So as Christians, that's sort of what we're trying to do, is rewire our brains to think God's way. And in some ways, CBT gave me some of the tools to do that, both in terms of the mental illness that I was struggling with, but also to help me think, okay, how do I apply what God says to my life? Andrew and Joe, is that, I don't know if that's right, but that was my experience.
Really
Yeah,
I'm gonna dive in there, because we've got lots of questions coming in. No, but thank you, Connie. That was really incredibly helpful, and very useful indeed to hear your experience of that. So thank you. I've got a question here about mindfulness. So how does mindfulness fit in with being a Christian and mental health? Any thoughts about that? Actually, another question, which is related. Why would you say that Christianity has anything different to say into mental health than other spiritual approaches, e.g. Buddhism or mindfulness?
I'm just gonna I might just answer the first question, because that's the easier one, I feel like. So mindfulness being a way of focusing your attention in an intentional way on the present moment. Very, incredibly popular, isn't it? There's loads of apps that can help you to do it, YouTube videos. I think actually focusing on the present moment can be incredibly useful. Jesus says in the Bible, don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to take care of itself. And, there's loads of sort of problems that are caused by our minds jumping about all over the place. We have maybe sad memories of something that happened a really long time ago, or my mind is very fond of jumping into the future and imagining the worst case scenario, and all of that can really sort of disrupt and really get in the way of maybe what we're trying to do at the moment, today, and cause a great deal of suffering, anxiety, and inconvenience. So I see. I mean, mindfulness, it is connected to Buddhism, and I do think sort of in modern life, actually, it is talked about an awful lot, and I think it has been sort of overemphasised as a massively sort of helpful cure for everything. I mean, I really don't think it is a cure for everything, but it's a tool that I actually don't think is totally inconsistent with Christianity. Dwelling on the now, dwelling on what God is today.
Maybe Christianity gives you a better reason to be content and to be thankful and grateful, and to focus on what God's giving you in the here and now. Yeah, I can see that. Let me ask another question. A brief question for you, Connie. What was the album that you listened to?
A guy called Andrew Peterson, and it's called The Burning Edge of Dawn, and it just gave words. One other song actually is by a friend of mine called Ben Slee, and it's Where O Grave. And it hopefully, so that's a kind of song we might sing in church. And then an album that's written by a Christian, kind of reflecting on life, is Andrew Peterson, The Burning Edge of Dawn. Yeah, just lie on your sofa and listen to the words.
I want to look it up. Thank you. We talked about this sort of tension between the present and the future. The Bible says somewhere, doesn't it? My tears are my food. That someone is just, and in the future, God will wipe away those tears. So someone asks, is it wrong to hope or expect healing this side of heaven for mental health struggles? How do we walk along people in the context of praying or wanting this? So do we expect healing now? Or is that only something that will happen in the future?
That's a tremendously important question. I would say I think we experience healing all the time. I used to have a nosebleed and I don't now, and that's because I got healed, and it was a wonderfully extraordinary natural mechanism that healed it, and I'm so thankful. And those healing mechanisms are around us and are operating all the time. The reason why I haven't, as far as I know, yet got cancer is because things that could have developed into cancer have already been fixed within the amazing body that God created and sustained. And we understand those mechanisms. And so I'm so thankful that so much healing is happening all the time. And Joe is involved in a kind of healing within the NHS. And I'm so thankful for all the people that go into hospital sick and come out well. And that's, I thank God for that, for his kindness. So in one sense, yes, we do expect healing now, but we don't know what degree, and we don't know who, and we don't know when. We've come to expect it because God has surrounded us with these sort of ways of blessing us with his kindness, and we can take them for granted, and we do, and he still gives them to us. We don't thank God for the hospital that we just got held up for half an hour in the appointment for, but actually the good they did, I should be thanking him for that. But that's not the same thing as saying that I have been given the right to demand from God a timetable of my choosing when healing happens, or even that healing happens. Jesus himself died, and every follower of Jesus has died until the day when everything gets sorted out. Sometimes we can speak as if we can escape death, and we can escape illness. And I think that's really unhelpful. We're not given that promise at all until the day Connie read out, that where God sorts everything. So I thank God for all the healing that happens already, that we all experience. We are able to ask for healing of any degree, and it may or may not happen in ways that God knows, but it will happen at one point in the future for all who've entrusted themselves into his care. In the end, if we push God away from our lives all the time, then there isn't a promise that we're going to get beautifully restored and healed. But if we can trust ourselves to him, then eventually, yes, we can all look forward to that kind of healing.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay. A question here about demon possession in the Bible. So someone says, is mental illness a form of demon possession? Is mental illness the same as the references to people being possessed by impure spirits in the New Testament?
Go. No, Joe, you took an in-breath, did you, Joe? You start.
I'll say a little bit and then hand over to someone else. I don't think so. I guess in modern life, we are getting a better and better understanding of how the brain works, both the brain as an organ, but kind of the mechanisms that kind of underpin our thinking and behaviour, and sort of all the ways in which those things interact with physical health, our relationships, perhaps difficult past experiences as well. So I don't think at the moment we have a 100% complete understanding of those things, but probably with the kind of research that has happened, we've got more of an understanding than 2,000 years ago or whatever. So sorry, I'll hand over to someone else, but the short answer is no, I don't think it is quite the same thing, actually.
Yeah, I think some Christians have wanted to try and explain, or some people have wanted to read what is written in the Gospels and trying to explain what feels to us weird as demons possession, because it seems to have some features of mental illness, for example, or epilepsy, or other things which we recognise. And I think I think there are two sort of threads that are helpful, and this will only be a very superficial answer. One thread is that there's a sense, the Bible's realistic that there is a kind of a personal opponent, enemy of God and his people. You don't have to accept it to become Christian. I've accepted after becoming Christian because I can see it makes sense of things, and Jesus spoke with such clarity about it. But there is a personal enemy of God. He's losing. He's been defeated. He's, as it were, in his death throes in Bible thinking. But that is real, and it's a mistake to say there's no such thing as evil or evil powers. There's a similar mistake on the other side, which reads everything that's wrong with the world as the personal function of evil powers, and we've got to have our own little conquest of evil in order for things to get better. And I don't think that's right either. I think when Jesus came, Satan showed up and did his darndest to get in the way of what Jesus was doing, and Jesus defeated him very straightforwardly, and in the life of every other person, and then defeated him at immense personal cost when he died in our place. And that was the moment when Satan knew he would not be able to win over any other human being who put themselves into Jesus' hands, because he had nothing against them anymore. But I've not seen any cases of similar behavior to what Jesus experienced and himself referred to as demon possession. That doesn't mean I won't ever. It doesn't mean other people haven't. But I think that to develop a reflex in which we want to try and interpret all the brokenness in people's lives as some kind of demonic influence, in the end will mean we don't get some of the amazing help that is there in the work that Joe and others do, because we think, we think it's not relevant. I think it's highly relevant. Sorry, that wasn't a very clear answer. Took too long.
No, thank you.
Move on.
No, I think it was actually. Thank you very much, Steve. So I think we see a bit of a distinction between those two things. Yeah, that's very helpful. Okay, final question. We haven't got long to go. But let me ask you this one, which someone submitted. What would you say to someone with mental health challenges who is wondering whether it will be helpful to find out more about the Christian faith?
Do it.
Connie, do you want to kick off with that?
Oh, sorry, I just said do it, find out. I kind of think I just think Jesus is amazing. And personally, when you were talking about mindfulness earlier, I think it's really helpful to let the thoughts and feelings pass sometimes in mindfulness. But to be honest, a lot of that's about emptying your mind. The thing I find most helpful is being able to remember what God says about me. Like when I'm struggling and I can't get a grip on life or my thoughts, or whether I'm coming or going or what's up, what's down, there's one thing that I know that is true. Like what's written in here, like these words are true. And I actually struggle with that all the time. I'm like, can I really trust God? How could God allow so much suffering in the world? How's this all going on? And actually, when I come back to this, there are things that he says about it. He gives us answers. And I just think you'll find the most amazing help, healing, hope in getting to know the person of Jesus. And I kind of think, if like, what's there to lose? You can look into it and then decide, actually, it's not true, and that's fine. And then you've given it a go and you can crack on with your life. But you might find the most amazing relationship, person ever, who will just be with you through thick and thin. Sorry, I've gone on, but like, he's so good. Please look into who he is. Yeah.
Thank you. Joe or Andrew, anything to add?
It's an amazing thing that you would contemplate making such an inquiry at the same time as when you're battling some of those things. And in one sense, I would say don't expect too much of yourself, because exactly as Connie said, you might not be the first person to turn in a moment where they're acutely aware of their need towards someone who not only understands your need better than you ever realized, but understands you better than you ever realized, but has an amazing capacity and promise and relationship for you, which will hold you and secure you and reassure you and love you.
Yeah.
And the promise that Connie spoke about earlier, you can learn that he will hold on to you with that, and that you have that kind of security. And is that a good thing to have as you battle mental illness? There is nothing better.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we're going to finish on that note, but thank you very much indeed for joining us. We mentioned a few places that it's possible to find help. The Mind website is very helpful, www.mind.org.uk. It's a useful place to go. I had a look on the NHS website as well, and there are lots of different avenues that you can follow there to find some help if you're someone struggling with mental health, or if you're supporting someone who is struggling with their mental health. Like Connie said, that can be a very costly thing to do. Or do get in contact with your GP, who also can point you in all kinds of different directions. And just to say that if you do have spiritual questions and you want to explore those further, there's a course called Christianity Explored, and it goes through a short account of Jesus's life, and it's a chance to weigh up Jesus Christ for yourself. Like Connie says, if you decide that it's not for you, that's fine. But what Jesus seems to be offering is something so important and so striking that I would say that it merits further investigation. If you want to take part in a Christianity Explore course, we have them going on all the time. At the moment, they're online, and we'd love you to take part. This is my email address. It's just going to come up, jeremy@trinityislington.org, jeremy@trinityislington.org. Do please get in touch with me. And if you haven't got a pen to hand, you can go to the Trinity Church Islington website, www.trinityislington.org, or just search Trinity Church Islington, and you can contact me that way. Good. Well, it just remains for me to say a very, very big thank you to Connie and Joe and Andrew. Thank you for all of your wisdom and your insight. We appreciate that very much indeed. Thank you to everybody who's joined us, and I hope you have a very good night. Good night.
Thanks.